Hello to all my aspiring adults. You're listening to an Old School Millennial podcast. You have me, Lauren, behind the mic, and here we talk about all the crazy, awkward, embarrassing, and amazing moments on this wild journey to adulthood. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I hope we can help each other out. Let's get into the episode. It's like a conversation, but make it a podcast. Hello everyone, and welcome back to an Old School Millennial podcast. You have myself, Lauren, behind the mic, and I'm super excited to be talking to you today. I imagine, as many of you who are listening are, I am just an aspiring adult who really doesn't have it all together, and I'm really excited to be able to create this community. And my hopes are that people will come to this community and we can relate to one another and some of the struggles and the successes that we may be experiencing. And we can even get a little bit of entertainment out of it and just laugh at some of the curveballs that life throws at us. And at the very least, I want you to come away learning something from this podcast. And I really want to start a conversation with you. So that being said, I guess the best way to get a hold of me, you can always send an email to the email address anoldschoolmillennialpodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact me on Instagram, which is @anoldschoolmillennial. Like I said, I'm really excited to start this community and start a dialogue and start talking to you guys. So before I get into the episode, I'm going to do another hashtag of the week. And if you're listening to this the day it's released, then you'll know that I released 2 episodes today. So make sure you go check out my other episode, which is about hard lessons. So as the title says, I'm sharing lessons with you that I learned the hard way in hopes that you can learn the lessons and skip the whole hard part. Make sure to check out that one after you listen to this. Back to my original point, I did release 2 episodes on the same day, but I recorded them in 2 separate weeks. So technically, I'm not cheating with the hashtag of the week. This week's hashtag is follow your dreams. And there's a few different components to this. So the first one is like the stereotypical follow your dreams, follow your passion, follow whatever you want to do in life. I think it's super important to not just want what people tell you to want, but to actually go after the things that you want. And I think it's amazing that if you take other people's input and feedback, and like I said, I'm trying to create a community that helps to do that, but I don't think you should mistake opinion for fact, and I also don't think you should let other people's opinion rule what you do. Just a little food for thought. So that's part 1 of that. Part 2 is like follow your literal dreams. So dreams have the power to tell you so much about your everyday life, and I think we don't see that enough and we don't acknowledge that enough. So I've done a ton of research and listened to a bunch of podcasts. I definitely recommend you search that if you have the chance, but dreams are so powerful, and I think they help you really tune in to what your subconscious mind wants, because it's so hard to listen to your subconscious when you're awake and you have all these other pressures on you and you're trying to do a million things at once. And it can be sometimes hard to like parse through all of that to get to what your subconscious really wants and it's telling you that you need. But when you're sleeping, you don't have any of that other stress. So you're able to really tune in and see what your subconscious mind needs to thrive. And I think we should all kind of try and harness the power of dreams a little bit more. So something simple that I started doing is every morning, I just have a note in my phone called dreams, and then I write the date, and then every morning when I wake up, if I can remember my dream, I'll write down like a few points about the dream, or if I can't remember the dream, I just write down the first thought that comes to my mind in the morning, because that's the thought that's most uninhibited by all these other things that you might have going on. Because if you're anything like me, 2 seconds after I wake up, I'm thinking about what I have to do that day. So anything past that first thought isn't that clear, but the first thought can tell you a lot about, again, what that subconscious mind wants. And then if there's any patterns that come up, anything that I feel like I need to address, then I tend to do that, and I find that it provides me like a lot more clarity, and overall I just feel better. So now let's get into the episode. So the working title I have for this episode is called Adult Successes. I don't think that's the best title, and maybe it's changed by the time I put this out there, but I think when you get down to it, it does a pretty good job at describing what I'm going to talk about this episode, and that's some things that I would consider successes, and I'm really proud about myself for doing, and I learned lessons from these as well that I want to share with you. And in contrary to last episode, none of them were that expensive and none of them were that hard to learn. So as I mentioned, I really hope that you walk away learning something from this. And I really just want to pass on some knowledge to make your life a little better, because that's what this podcast is all about. It's about learning the things we need to and laughing when we have to live our best lives. So the first thing I want to talk about is my journey to becoming independent. And I definitely am not 100% of the way there. I've become a lot more independent in the last couple of years than I ever have been before. So when I lived at home with my parents, and I have one brother, I relied on them a lot to do things. Everything from making doctor's appointments to oil changes, and I absolutely hated doing any maintenance on my car. I didn't do it, and I had other people do it for me, or if I wanted to hang a picture, change a light bulb, anything like that, I would rely on family and friends for. And I like to think that I was super independent, and in many ways I was, but there was still a lot that I didn't do by myself, and I didn't even know that I didn't do it, if that makes any sense. So once I moved, I lived completely on my own, and in the beginning, I had almost no one else to rely on because I moved to a city where I knew like not a single soul. It was really eye-opening for me how non-independent I was. But at the same time, I kind of viewed it as an opportunity to become more independent and really show myself that I can do anything I set my mind to. So that could be simple things like making my own appointments, changing my own light bulbs, and doing my own dishes, which if you heard in the last episode, I'm still not very good at, but I do them. So that's a little win there. And like I said, I really just proved to myself that I'm capable of so much more than I thought possible. And I think this is really powerful for everyone. So I don't think you need to move to a whole other place and have almost no one else to rely on to make yourself more independent. It's a little dramatic, but just tends to be the way I do business. But I think taking a little more accountability for your actions and just becoming more independent in general definitely helps prove to yourself that you can do anything that you set your mind to. And then this translates into different arenas of your life. And overall, I think just makes you a more positive, happy, and capable person. So the mindset that I've adopted is I'll figure it out. Anything that comes my way, I know that I'll be able to figure it out. And I think this is a good starting point, even if you don't feel you're that independent, to start creating that positive reinforcement in your mind, because what your mind says you can do, you'll do. So even if you're not independent, I think is a really good first step is just saying to yourself, I'll figure it out. But for me, I've gotten to the point where I've proven that time and time again. So I've gotten a little bit of positive reinforcement on that statement, and it just keeps ringing true for me. So I find that's really powerful, and I would definitely recommend to just start small with that little saying, and I think you'll notice a big difference. So that small action ties into my second success, which is learning to acknowledge the small things. So if success is just one big goal, then for the most part, you're going to be let down a lot, because one big goal is just a bunch of smaller goals put together. But if you don't acknowledge those smaller goals, and sometimes they take a really long time to add up to that big goal, then you're going to get discouraged and you're not going to see yourself as successful, even though that may not even be true. And as I mentioned before, what the mind says, it does. So if you keep telling yourself that you're not successful because you haven't reached this huge overarching goal, then chances are you're never going to reach that because you don't even acknowledge that you can be successful in the first place. So I started looking at the small things, and I just made like little mental notes when they went right. So that could be being on time to school or work, sticking to my grocery budget every week, or even sticking up for myself or speaking up when I thought it was necessary. And I mean, this doesn't have to be groundbreaking, but even just in these little conversations where you are with someone and they're saying something that you don't think is right, and it would be so much easier for you just to sit back and not say anything, but you choose to step up, acknowledge it, say your piece. And I find most of the time the other person's like, oh, sorry, I didn't know that. And you've even helped educate them. So that's just putting more positivity out there. So anything small like that, I tend to make a mental note of. And those little things add up. So sometimes I've even written down these small things. I've done a lot of research on writing down positives at the end of the day, or whatever part of your day that makes most sense. And so you can look back and reflect on them and see all of these successes, because sometimes I think we tend to have like a confirmation bias, which means that when you believe something, you start seeing everything that makes that true. So like I said, if you don't acknowledge the small successes and you're just looking at these big goals that you're not achieving, then you're kind of in a roundabout way saying to yourself that you're not successful. So then you start looking for all of these things that will prove that right. So it just perpetuates this cycle of negativity. Whereas if you're able to break that cycle, look at the small successes and then acknowledge them, you're going to start looking for more successes. The confirmation bias is going to flip, and you're going to start looking for all of these little successes, and then all of a sudden you're going to have achieved that big goal that you set out to. So really just recognize the small things and allow yourself to be proud of them. I know for me, so many times it was like, oh, that isn't a big deal. Like I just created that document, or I did well on this paper, or my boss liked this. I didn't allow myself to acknowledge and be proud of it. And I'm not saying that you should flaunt around and pretend like you're the best thing since sliced bread, because sliced bread is the best thing. You will never be better than it, so sorry. But allowing yourself to be proud of the little things, in the end, it just raises your vibrations and attracts more positive energy. And if you don't believe me, give it a try. I guarantee you'll see little changes for sure. So this leads into my next point of becoming more myself and not apologizing for who I am. So I'm definitely a super sarcastic person, and over time I've become quite cynical. But I know where the line is for the most part, and I love to make people laugh, and I kind of do that in a cynical, self-deprecating type of way. And there were many people in my life who did not appreciate this, or said that it wasn't ladylike, or I shouldn't be saying those things about myself, or whatever their opinion may be. And I used to always apologize for it. I used to say sorry. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are definitely times where I did cross the line and an apology was more than warranted. But there were so many times where it was just their opinion. They didn't like what I was saying, or they didn't like how I was saying it. And I should not have to apologize for that. No one should have to apologize for being who they are. If you are not hurting anyone else and you're doing something that makes you happy and that helps you put positive energy out into the world, then there's absolutely nothing to apologize about. So I stopped apologizing because, like I said, this seems to be a common theme in this episode. Whatever's going through your mind, that's what's going to happen. So if I keep apologizing for myself, then I'm putting this layer of shame over who I am. And when you have a layer of shame over it, you're not going to excel or really be good at anything, because you're always trying to outrun the shame or try to be something that you're not. So I stopped apologizing. I removed that layer, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't happen that easy, and it took a really long time, and I'm definitely think I'm still working through that process. But the simple act of not apologizing did absolute wonders. So stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. And I know that this can be really hard and it's way easier said than done, but I promise you it's worth it. So becoming more myself created this positivity, almost domino effect. And by making that one small change, aka not apologizing, I found that in combination with all these other things I've talked about, it made a big difference in just creating that positive vibe and surrounding yourself with all of this good energy. And that links directly to my next point of your vibe attracts your tribe. So once I started going through this process of really trying to be more authentic in my everyday life and not trying to be the chameleon and change depending on who I was around and try to be the person that I thought they wanted me to be, I started attracting people into my life who actually liked me for me, and I didn't have to pretend around them. So I'm super thankful for all of these people, and like I said, it created that like positivity domino effect. Like now I was removing the negative thoughts, I was putting in positive thoughts, and now all of a sudden there was positivity surrounding me as well. And once you surround yourself with positive people, you almost feel limitless in what you can achieve. Like it's just one less barrier for you to live your best life and achieve really whatever you want to. So these people in my life, they bring out the best in me and they help motivate me to be better, and they support all of these crazy endeavors that I tend to take on. And speaking of this tribe, actually, my friends and I have decided to start a second podcast because I barely have one, so I definitely need two. And it's called Did We Make a Reservation? You can find us on Instagram at Did We Make a Reservation? And you can kind of check us out. There's not really much up right now, but you can check out my friends. You can Insta stalk them. You can Insta stalk me. And I think that one's going to be a little more fun, a little more witty. So I'm really excited for that. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to what we're talking about, some of the struggles we go through. And I think we have a really interesting mix of people who are pretty close in age, but are kind of at different points in our lives in some areas and at the same points in our lives in other areas. So I think it'll be really interesting, and I really hope you'll check it out. And then the last point I'd like to make on this is that it's truly quality over quantity. I would rather have a few really good friends who bring out the best in me than a ton of friends who, like I said, I have to change myself around all the time. You imagine all the mental energy you put into changing yourself when you're around someone that would be way better dedicated to manifesting positivity in your life. So definitely for me, it's quality over quantity. And I encourage you to do that reflection as well and make sure the people that you have in your life are really bringing out the best in you. And my last but not least point is going after what I really wanted instead of going after what I've been taught to. So there's many examples of this in my life, but I was always told, like growing up, I was good at math and science, and everyone always said that because I was good at those subjects, like I should be a lawyer, I should be a doctor, like those kind of typical, not typical professions, but kind of stereotypical, if you're good at these subjects, then you should go into these professions. And for a long time, I listened to that and I adopted that and I made that what I wanted. So going through high school, I took all the maths and all the sciences and went into a science-based program in university and started attending like seminars on how to get into med school and all of this stuff. And I fooled myself into thinking that that's what I wanted, when in reality, it's not exactly what I wanted. And it took me a long time to peel those layers away and realize that that wasn't what I wanted. And did I really want to spend the rest of my life? And if you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor, that's so many years of schooling. Did I want to spend that many years of schooling and the rest of my life in a profession that I didn't like? And to me, the answer was no. And this kind of brings me back to a point that I made in my hard lessons episode, where I talk about if you have to convince yourself that something's a good idea, then it's probably not a good idea. And in the end, you should just trust your gut and go with whatever you think is going to make you happy. And it's not to say that that decision is going to be the right one for you, or it's not to say that if it's a profession that you're going to do that for the rest of your life. But I think it's really important to start recognizing your own thoughts and feelings towards something and recognizing them as valid. I used to think that if someone else said it to me, that somehow their opinion was more valid than mine, and that's just not the case. You need to trust yourself, you need to believe in yourself, and you need to recognize that your feelings and opinions are just as valid as external ones. So as I mentioned, I was in a more science-based program and ended up switching to an arts-based program, which in the end, I'm so happy I did, and I'm so happy that I went with what I wanted to in the first place. So just some other little bonus successes I want to talk about. I find I've been drinking more water lately because, as I mentioned on the last podcast, my hashtag of the week was 2020 is the year of hydration, and I'm sticking to that. And I definitely noticed when I drink more water that overall I just function as a human better, which makes complete sense because, like, what is it? 80% of your body is made up of water. So all of that makes sense, but for some reason I spent most of 2019 dehydrated. And I would definitely recommend that you get all of your water in. I promise you, I know everyone says this and everyone's like, oh no, don't talk about water anymore. But I promise you it will make a big difference. So please do yourself a favor. Buy yourself a really cute water bottle. I bought a Swell water bottle and it keeps my water cold and it's cute and it just stays at work all the time. So it's always there. It's always available. Definitely do that. And I've also started saying no to things lately that I know won't bring me any type of joy, and in fact will probably do the opposite and stress me out. And like I mentioned, I'm super grateful to be surrounded by really amazing friends. And even if we have plans before and I know I'm maybe just having one of those weekends where I really don't want to be around people and I know it's going to make me more anxious than anything, I'm just able to go to them and say, hey, I don't think this is right for me today, and they're always really good about it. But I think it's just taking the time to reflect and just acknowledge that if something is not going to bring you joy and in fact it's going to stress you out, then maybe it's not worth doing. I'm not saying this applies to every single circumstance, but I think it's important to take time and just check in with yourself, do a little mental check-in, see how the brain's doing, see how her day's going, make sure she has everything she needs. And if she's absolutely screaming at you not to go to that festival, then maybe you don't need to go to the festival. And my last point of other successes is just to move your body. And I know this sounds like really simple and you're like, I move my body all day. But I even find like getting home and doing like a short workout or like a short yoga session, Pilates, spin class, like whatever floats your boat, I think that really helps in that like positive domino effect. I find if I come home and I don't do anything and I immediately go in the chair and start binge watching Criminal Minds, which definitely happens sometimes, then I'm not getting anything done. I'm not working on the stuff I need to. I'm not being productive. It sets the tone for the rest of my night. But if I come home and I'm able to even do like a quick 20-minute workout, then I find I'm super productive for the rest of the night. I get all these things done that I need to. And in the end, it just makes me feel better because I've gotten all the things that I needed to done. And then once I feel better, then I'm like, oh, I want to do that again. Like it just creates that positive reinforcement in your mind. So I would definitely recommend that you find something you like and just do it. It doesn't have to be really long and it doesn't have to be every day. Small changes, as I mentioned, equal big successes. So definitely move your body. So that brings me to the end of another episode. I can't believe we've already had 2 episodes together. And I really want you to tell me your successes. Like I said, probably 1,000 times in this, I want to create that community. I want to create that place where people can go to, where we can, swap stories and we can laugh and we can just, have fun together and go on this wild adult journey. So I want you to head on over to @AnOldSchoolMillennial on Instagram and just kind of tell me what your successes are. Like I'm genuinely interested and I hope I helped you out. So maybe we can swap stories, and I think that could be really fun as well. So that's all for me today, but as I mentioned a few times throughout the podcast, I did record a second episode on this inaugural day of an old school millennial, and it's where I talk about some of the hard lessons that I've learned, and I want to give you those hard lessons so you don't have to go through the same scenarios that I did. And if at the very least, I think you should go listen to it and have a laugh and how much I absolutely suck at adulting. So make sure you listen to that episode as well. And then when you're done with that, head over to @AnOldSchoolMillennial on Instagram and tell me what you thought about that episode. Tell me what you thought about this episode. Tell me how your day went. Tell me what you ate for breakfast this morning. Tell me if you even eat breakfast, because I don't. So in terms of all those typical podcast things, I know you know what to do, but I'm going to say them anyways. Subscribe to the podcast, An Old School Millennial, and leave your honest review. Also, if you want to share it with some friends, maybe you know someone who could benefit from one of these lessons, I think that would be really great. And head on over to Instagram @AnOldSchoolMillennial and tell me what you thought about the episode. And if you like any of the posts that you see there, you can put them in your story, you can send them to a friend, do all of those fun Instagram things. And I really look forward to seeing you over there. So from one aspiring adult to another, thank you for listening, and I can't wait to chat next week. Hey, so yeah, it's me again. I kind of lied earlier when I said I was done. I screwed up a lot making that episode, and I kind of want to share some of those with you. So hope you enjoy. I cannot say that many times. Ooh, that's... See you next week.